Hello and welcome back to Crafted by Corie. If you're new, I'm Corie. Welcome to my channel. If you're returning, thank you as always for being here. I have a compilation of Valentine's DIYs for you. So let's go ahead and get right on into the crafting.
DIY number 1.
Okay, this is from the Dollar Tree. I've had it in my stash for a while, and then I've got a bunch of my Kirkland ribbons that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to go ahead and prep this by taking it apart. At first I was trying to save those little plastic rings holding the hearts together, but ultimately I got the first one off whole, but the second one it ended up breaking. I was not really sure why I was trying to salvage them in the first place, but I went ahead and took all of that tinsel, I'm going to call it, off, and then I was going around trying to cut off all the little nubbies on the heart. Realized that it was easier to just break them off with my fingers for the most part. There were a few that were a little thicker and harder and I needed the scissors for, but once I got those all cleaned up, I was ready to work with my ribbon. Now, I had done something, I think it was 2 years ago, with a heart form and ribbon, and I really loved the way that it turned out, and I figured I would try to apply that style to this project, but I couldn't remember quite how I had gone about doing it to get it started and to make sure that everything was lined up, and it took me a minute to get it figured out. And to be honest, the way that I did it on the first heart was not the most efficient, so I kind of learned as I went. So hopefully you'll have the benefit of learning from what I did, and it'll make it that much easier for you. But I had started out by adhering all of the strips that I knew I was going to need to the one edge of the heart form. That one at the bottom, I made the mistake of gluing it on both sides. I would not do that again if I were to do it this way again. But I went ahead and glued them down on one edge. And then I got my other ribbon ready there in a second. I'm just kind of making sure that it's all going to cover. But I flipped that back, and now I've got my other alternating ribbon there that I'm going to be working with that I'm going to do the same thing with, but across the top. So going perpendicular. Yeah. So once I had all of that set, I went ahead and glued those across the top, and then I was ready to start kind of weaving the ribbon together, for lack of a better term. So I'm going to alternate my ribbons under and over, essentially, going up and down, and then also across. So just alternating the ribbons like this. I was hopeful that having them anchored at one end, it was going to be enough to help keep them in place. And it did to some extent, but I think because this form is much smaller than the one that I had done in the past, it was harder actually to get everything to line up the way that I wanted it. So it wasn't perfect. But I did the best that I could with it. So once I got to the end, I had to just manipulate the ribbon to glue it down around the other side of the form, making sure that I was keeping the ribbon in the same pattern, or the correct pattern, and wrapping it around that other edge and just getting that secured with the hot glue. So it was fine, but in just a second I'm going to show you a different method that I personally think worked out better, and it's what I ended up doing for the third heart as well, because I just felt like it looked much cleaner and neater, and it worked well. So I went ahead and cut all of my strips, making sure that I had enough to cover the entire form. And for this one, I did the 4 top to bottom, as you can see here, and I did 5 across, but I found that it was a little short top to bottom, so on the third heart I ended up doing 5 and 5, just for reference. So now I'm going to go ahead and try to weave it on my tabletop. This was much cleaner in the end, as I said. However, to start, it was a little bit of a challenge because it was just slipping around and it didn't really want to stay put. I ended up starting to glue it all together, And I actually glued it a little bit to the top of my table on purpose, knowing that I'd be able to peel it up off of there once it was done. But it just helped to kind of anchor it. Thinking about it some more now, you could also, if you have just a square of scrap fabric you could use as a base, you could certainly be gluing your pieces to that instead of to your tabletop. And that is also an option. And it might also give it a little bit more, weight isn't the right word. It just might be a little bit easier to work with, is my thought now, looking back on it. But once I had it all together, I peeled it up off of my table surface. I do have something covering my table here. It's something that I got from the Hobby Lobby. It's like a bulletin board, something or other. I don't know. It's flame retardant and heat resistant, and it's kind of like a plasticky kind of thing. But anyway, the glue peeled right off of there. And now I am just using my solid piece to wrap around the form and just get it anchored all the way around so that it conforms to the heart. You just want to be mindful as you're doing this that the glue is in places that are not going to interfere with your fingers, and probably want to use your finger protectors. I did just fine, excuse me, without the finger protectors, but I probably should have been wearing them just to be safe. I think my fingers are a little too fat for them, and so I don't know. I always feel like they're a little snug. But this is for the third heart. This time, some of the glue did get, and I wasn't as careful about the placement, and so unfortunately you can see some of the dots of glue. It was unintentional on my part. So something to just keep an eye on, and making sure that you're applying your glue more to the edges of the ribbon, especially if you have something like this burlap that it goes through, or just use it very sparingly. All right, so you all know that I like to make sure that the backs of my projects are nice and clean and neat. So we're gonna go ahead and cover these up with some felt. This has been in my stash for a while. I'm just gonna trim it down. I got a piece that was the approximate shape, and now I can go in and make it a little bit more custom to the back of my heart. And I'm going to just trim off a little bit at a time because I can always take off more. I can't put it back on once I cut it. So that's why I'm doing the multiple iterations here. Now you certainly could try to just trace the heart shape. I knew I wanted it a little bit smaller than the actual hearts themselves, so I opted to do it this way. But if you find it easier to trace the hearts, even perhaps before you put the ribbons on them, maybe that would be a good idea as well. And then you've got a really good, accurate heart shape. But once I had one of them done, I just used that as a template for the other two. And then I set about gluing them down. I'm just adding the glue to the edge. You can either put it on the ribbon or you can put it on the felt heart itself. So you can see here, I did ultimately start just putting the glue on the felt, and that way I was certain it was going to be where it needed to be when I applied it to the back of the heart. So now I have this burlap ribbon that I'm going to use again to attach them together. I'm going to be applying a liberal amount of glue to the back of that first heart, setting that ribbon down in it, waiting for it to cool sufficiently to continue moving on. As you can see, that glue is coming right through that ribbon. So you know that ribbon is going to be in there solid. It's not going to be coming away. I did the same thing for that center heart. I glued it top and bottom. And then I will do the same thing with that third heart, gluing it top and bottom, and I'm going to extend that ribbon beyond the top of the heart because I'm going to also create a hanger for it with this ribbon, just letting it extend beyond the top. Here I'm just making sure that my hearts are spaced the same, helping my glue to cool by fanning it. And now I'm just identifying where I want that hanger, how long I want that hanger to be, and trimming that off accordingly. I'm going to go ahead and fasten that down with some hot glue as well. And then I wanted to create a little bit of a bow, so I did just a loop, and I've got another piece that I'm going to wrap around there and tie off to create my little simple bow. And I'm going to be attaching that to the hanger part just below the loop. So added a bunch of glue to that once I had it the way I wanted it. I'm going to apply it right there. And again, just be mindful of the hot glue and make sure that you're careful not to burn yourself because it can get very hot. I'm going to go ahead and dovetail my ribbon tails here, my bow tails, and then this one is really going to be done. I think it's super cute, but let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 2.
Okay, this is going to be quick and simple. I'm calling it simple, not necessarily easy, because I struggled with it a little bit, but I am sure that you can learn from my challenges and make it much easier on yourself. So I started out with a balloon thinking that this would be a good way to create my form and thinking that my balloon was going to be a little more pliable than it actually was and a little bit more cooperative than it actually was. This material that I'm using with it is something I got off of Amazon. It's essentially like a paper wrapped wire. And it just has this really nice natural look to it, almost like rattan, I want to call it. But I'm just trying to twist this off on the bottom of the balloon. As you can see, it's like rolling away, and it was a struggle trying to get it to do what I was envisioning I wanted it to do. I'm essentially trying to cinch the balloon a bit in the middle to create a heart shape. I'm thinking that this could be my form, that I wrap this all around and then I could pop the balloon and have my heart form, right? Yeah. The balloon wasn't cooperating and I was just getting frustrated. And eventually, right about now, I decided that this just wasn't going to work and I opted to do something different. So here I am about to give up. Well, I guess not quite, because I can be a little determined. So started to wrapped it around a little bit on the other side, and then I was like, yeah, this isn't gonna do it. So took it all off, and then started to try to just do it free form. Now in hindsight, if I had started with a smaller heart shape that would have just ultimately ended up in the middle of my form, it might have been a little bit easier. But instead I'm starting with a large heart shape. Or even if I had started with maybe more of like a ball shape and then formed the heart around that ball shape, there are probably a few different ways that I could have tackled this. But of course, I went right for the size and shape that I wanted. So I'm just kind of wrapping it around itself, trying to anchor the wire in certain places to maintain the shape and the form that I'm trying to go for. And then I just started wrapping it. I have to admit, once I started wrapping it, it became much easier, which is why I'm thinking if you were to start with a smaller shape and work your way outward, it might be a little bit easier to manage. But that's why I do this, right? So I can figure it out and then I can share with you what not to do and advise on what might work better. But just going to continue to wrap this around and around. And you're going to see here in just a second, as I get more of the material in place, as I wrap and wrap and wrap, it's going to start holding its form and its shape much more easily and readily and happily. So wrapping consistently, and it honestly is going to be done in about 30 seconds. So you can see it already starting to take more form. I'm struggling with it less and just wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. And this is something that you could use as a shelf sitter on a bookcase, in a bowl with other bowl filler. It's just, you could hang it on the wall. There are a lot of different things that you could do with this little piece. It's so rustic and natural looking that when I get it done, I just think it is a nice little touch and addition to any kind of decor that you might have for Valentine's Day, or even all year round. If you just happen to like the shape of it and the look of it, you could certainly keep it out on your bookcase or wherever it is that you like to decorate with this type of thing. So here you can see it's become much easier at this point. I'm going to go ahead and trim that off and tuck that down in, and then I'll just work with it a little bit more to continue to ensure that I've got the form that I want, and that all of the little strands, for lack of a better term, are positioned where I want them, and that it's not going to start to fall apart on me. Basically, I want to make sure everything is nice and secure and in place, and that is honestly it. But I'm going to show you a picture of it here. Let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 3.
All right, I have some items from the Dollar Tree here, as well as Dollar Tree, I think it's Dollar Tree Plus. Oh, goodness. And then this frame, I believe, is from Michael's. I had gotten it in a pack of a bunch of different size frames. I believe this one is 10 by 20. And I'm just trying to figure out the best way to approach this. I know exactly what I want to do, just trying to figure out the how now. So I've got a piece of parchment paper here that I'm going to use to try to help me center everything. I know I have some odd ways of doing things, but I promise it turns out really, really well. I love this project. But once I've identified center by site, I am going to lay out these little foam hearts. They're just foam covered in red glitter. If you're not a fan of glitter, you can certainly use other mediums. And now that I've got it kind of laid out in my heart shape, I'm just trying to see if I've got it centered. And I did have it really well centered from left to right, but it was a little low on the canvas, so I end up moving it up just slightly. Here I have my little ruler, just checking to see if I've got everything in position now. And then I went ahead and started gluing everything down. Just a little dab of my hot glue on each of these little hearts, and then attaching them to the canvas. I'm just being careful not to overdo it because I don't want there to be a lot of glue scooching out and visible. I want these to just kind of be attached without any visible sign of how they're attached. Hopefully that's making sense. But once I had those all on, I was ready to try to figure out the rest of it. So I did start in the center to ensure that everything would be centered. If I started on the left or on the right and tried to make my way across, I knew I was going to have spacing issues. So it was really important to me to start in the middle. Here I have my parchment paper again, and I'm going to fold it in half once more to try to find a center between the edge of my canvas and the heart. And as you can see, I've got that really well centered, and the parchment paper is a perfect size. Sorry about the chain rattling. Sammy is hanging out with me here. But I wanted to make sure my hearts were all going to be about the same size as well. So as you can see, I was using that initial heart and kind of tracing it with my parchment paper to get the correct size for my other hearts. And I'm going to use this pattern to dictate the size of the other two hearts. Now, Again, trying to figure out how to make sure that it's the right shape, right size, centered left and right, top to bottom. And so you can always tell what I'm thinking because I've got my little fingers tapping away. But I did finally figure out that I could kind of pry that up. I did want to try to see if I could follow the I want to say design, but yeah, I think you know what I'm talking about. Finally, I decided, you know what, let me put it on the parchment paper, lay it down, and maybe it'll kind of mark it for me where it needs to be. And then I did the same thing with the top side, and Sammy is now knocking into the table. This gave me an opportunity to apply the heart without having to try to figure out exactly where to apply it. Hopefully I'm making sense. You can see what I'm doing here. But once I had it basically marked out with a thin layer of glue, I went back in and added more. It was kind of hard to see there, I'm sure, on camera, but it was really easy for me to see in person where that glue was because it had a little bit of a sheen. So now I have my confetti glitter from the Dollar Tree that I'm applying here. This reminds me of that Easter kind of pinkish purple color. If you think about those foil wrapped chocolate eggs, that's what these colors make me think of. And I pulled the pink one out and I'm using that for the heart. So just applied a whole bunch of it. And I kind of press it down into the glue a little bit and making sure that everything is covered and that there aren't any gaps. And then I'll grab a piece of parchment paper and I will let the excess slide down off onto that I can then put back into the little sleeve that it came in for the next time. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, but this time I got smart. I'm just going to go ahead and apply all of the glue, or at least a nice little layer of glue, to my template. I'll flip that over, apply a little bit of pressure. There was some glue leakage there. I want to make sure I didn't get that on the canvas, so I put another little piece of parchment paper down there. But gonna just go ahead and tap that on. I'm trying not to press too hard because I don't want to squish outside the lines, so to speak. So I'm really just interested in marking where I need to apply the rest of the glue. Now, for this heart, I know I'm going to be using crushed decorative glass, so I am applying a heavier coat of my Mod Podge. You could also use school glue. It doesn't have to be Mod Podge, but I'm applying a heavier, thicker coat so that it will be more apt to holding on to the glass, which is going to be a lot heavier than that confetti I was using on the other side. Now, I wasn't sure how much of this I was going to need, and these little tubs don't hold a whole heck of a lot. So I started with the purple, and then I did end up having to use a few other colors. So I was just going in order of what I thought would be prettiest included here. So that was the purple first, and then I had it was a blue and purple kind of mixture. Then I had a rose gold. Now I'm applying some red. And then finally, I am going to be applying just a plain gold. That's this one right here. So they're all just kind of mixed together. If I had had a better idea of how much I was going to need, maybe I would have done it differently, and maybe I would have done stripes or whatever else. But I actually love the way that this turned out. And I'm just making sure that it's all kind of in the heart shape. I am tucking that all in, pressing it down into the glue just to make sure that it's going to be adhered and have nice coverage. And I'll do the same thing, knocking the excess off onto the parchment. And it kind of revealed a different shaded heart when I did that because of all the colors that were underneath, and I think it looks so cool. So then I started to put it back in, and then I noticed that there were some little gaps along the edges of the heart, so I just went back and outlined the whole outer edge, pressed that down, and then I went ahead and removed the excess again and got that all tucked away with the same process that I just used before. But I think this is so pretty. I'm going to show it to you here in a second, but I would love to know what you think. I absolutely love it.
DIY number 4.
All right, I have a whole bunch of stencils that I pulled out of my stash, and I have these heart forms. They basically are shelf sitters, I guess you could call it. And I was trying to decide how I wanted to decorate them. So I was originally thinking for the smaller one, I wanted a pattern on it. I thought that one might work, but it was just a tad bit too small. So I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to do it. I decided I was going to start with the larger one, figuring out which way I want it to sit on my tray. These actually are from XOXOXO, but you could really use whatever you have. And these are obviously not XOXOXO stencils. I'm just using the XOXOXO heart cutouts because I've had them in my stash and I wanted to be able to use them. I don't have the transfers, I guess they call them, that go along with the hearts. So I'm having to use my own stencils, which is perfectly fine. And I wanted to use the This Is Us. This is by Plaid. And I've had this for a while. You could see that I've used some of them in the past. And they're really cool because they're sticky. So they adhere nicely to whatever you're working on, and I found that they really don't bleed. At least that's been my experience so far with them. So definitely a fan. But I was just trying to get that lined up, wanted to make sure that when it's standing up on my tray that it looks like it's all straight. Now I certainly could have done it from top to bottom with the heart, but I thought it might be a little strange to see it with the word sideways, although when I think about it, I guess the candy hearts are done that way, so I really could have done it either way. But this is the way that I opted to do it. This other piece, I knew it wasn't going to fit, but I was being a little stubborn and trying to see if I could make it work. So I end up opting to do a different pattern at the top part of that heart. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and use my chalk paste. This is also from XOXOXO. I just decided I was going to try using this, even though it's not one of the silk screen transfers that is typically used. I just wanted to give it a shot and see how it would work with this. And it actually worked really well. I just had to be careful not to scrape it up off of the surface. So I kind of applied it somewhat generously so that it would remain on my piece that I was decorating. So I went ahead and just very carefully peeled this up. It does have that adhesive on it, so I'm trying not to stretch out the stencil too badly. I don't want to tear it, so just being very gentle and nice and crisp and clean. And then this, so that was purple shimmer, and this is candy apple red. And I'm going to use the candy apple red on this other Dollar Tree stencil as well. I'm just trying to figure out how I want that lined up. And then I decided I didn't want to use the little squeegee tool. I want to use this little sponge. So I have this makeup sponge from my stash that I'm going to use for this. And I'm just going to go ahead and dab off some of it so I avoid having bleeds with this. But the nice thing about the paste is that it's a little bit thicker than regular paint. At least that's what I have found. So I found it less likely to bleed, at least with the way that I was doing it here. So I just gradually made my way down until I had all of the stencil covered, and that was that. And then for the green part, this is also a chalk paste. It's called Pesto. It's just a really pretty green color. I went ahead and got that all filled in, and then I was ready to remove that last stencil, and this piece is going to be complete. And then I'm going to be setting myself to the task of figuring out how to decorate the complementing heart. But I love these stencils. I think they're so pretty. Very cool. All right. So I finally decided I was going to use that same stencil with the hearts and have it complement the other heart. So I'm going to just do this with the candy apple red again, with my little makeup sponge, and apply this to the entire surface of this smaller heart. I didn't have quite enough paint out there. I've been using these little packets. I save everything, you guys. I don't like to waste. So this, when you get the Chocolate monthly things that they do, they'll send you the transfer of the month and then the little paint samples that are sufficient to do the project with. Well, I tend to keep the packets because there's more paint in there and I can use them for other things. So I just end up wrapping them up and taping them just with Scotch tape to seal the little package, and it works just fine for me. And I also know that I can add a little bit of water to it if it gets a little bit too dry. But I think these turned out really sweet. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 5.
All right, Quaker Oats. This is an empty container and I am going to make a vase with it. So let's see what we can do here. I went ahead and cut down a piece of my parchment paper. I am trying to be a little bit more conservative with my materials because I feel like I go through this stuff pretty quickly. So I just cut out a square of that to use to protect my surface from the paint. This is that salmon coral chalk paint that I used a little bit earlier on our owl friend. I'm going to give this 2 good coats of paint just to make sure that I've got all of the design on this canister covered up. It probably would be okay with a single coat, to be honest, because of what we're going to be doing, but I went ahead and just made that double coat just in case. So once that was done, I went ahead and helped it out with some drying with my heat gun just to kind of speed up my process. And then I grabbed my Mod Podge. You could also use school glue for this, but I have a big tub of Mod Podge that I opted to use. And I'm putting on a pretty liberal coat. I had a little bit of a glob there that I took out, but put a pretty liberal coat all over the canister. And once I had that covered up, I went ahead and helped it dry again a little bit. Now, if any of you are familiar with doing crackle paint and you've done it yourself, I would love some pointers and tips, and I hope you'll leave me a comment, because I was feeling like I should have altered my brush strokes with this whole process. Because here I am coming in with my Adirondack white chalk paint, and as you can see, I'm going up and down on the canister perpendicular this entire time. I did it with the first coat with the salmon coral, I did it with the Mod Podge, and now I did it with the Adirondack white. And I think it impacted the way my crackles take place here. So I've got my paint on, I'm using the heat gun again. This is going to create the crackle with the semi-wet glue underneath there, and then the wet Adirondack white on top there. So you can see the crackles starting to come. And I do have some that are going at a diagonal or horizontally, but for the most part, these are going in the same direction as my brush strokes. So I'm thinking next time I try this, I need to try alternating my brush strokes, or maybe I should have dabbed the paint on that versus using that large paintbrush. I don't honestly know for certain. I will have to test it out. But perhaps you all have some tips and tricks you can share with me that would make my learning process go a little bit faster. So appreciate anything you can share in that regard. But just going to go ahead and continue to get that dry. And then I was trying to get it to cool down. I did have a few little bubbles there. And this was making me think of tree bark. So I'm actually kind of happy that it turned out this way, because it's giving me some ideas of other things I might want to try to do using this technique and doing it the same way that I just did, even though I want to learn how to do it the right way. So once that was cool enough to my liking and I was happy with moving on with the project, I went ahead and started looking for a ribbon, because I want to cover up the top edge of this So I have my white ribbon there that wasn't going to work for that. I pulled out a pink ribbon. It was just too bubblegum pink. But then I found this other ribbon that I had in my stash from the Dollar Tree. It's like a rose gold color, and it was perfect with that salmon coral tone. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap the top of the canister with this by applying just a thin coat of my glue, my hot glue. I am letting half of the ribbon dangle over the edge. Okay, so I'm only applying the first half of the ribbon to the canister, and then it's going to be wrapped around into the inside of the canister. So I'm letting half of it be glued to the outside of the canister and half of it is hanging over. Once I got that wrapped all the way around, I trimmed it off about an inch long of what I needed, tucked that under, and I'm going to overlap the starting and the ending with the ribbon tucked under just to have a nice clean edge to finish that off. And then I'll go about getting the ribbon all tucked in. So I'm just going to run a line of glue along the inside of the canister and wrap that ribbon around and tuck it down in. And I'll do that all the way around the inside of the canister until it's completely secured. Now I am going to take that white ribbon and create a bow, but I want to make sure that my bow isn't slipping and sliding all over the place. So for my own personal sanity, I am going to be tacking it down with some glue in a couple of places. You'll see that in just a second. So I first figured out how much ribbon I wanted, and now I'm going to go ahead and get it situated here. So I want to make sure that it's centered on the ribbon, tacking a little teeny bit of glue, applying that right over top of the initial ribbon that I put down, and I'm just leaving a little bit of an edge of that, I wanted to say copper, it is kind of a coppery color, the rose gold ribbon, leaving a little bit of an edge to be seen, and then just having the white ribbon kind of layered over top of it. So once I had that tacked down in those three little places, I went ahead and started tying my bow. Now, I don't know why it is, but every time I try to tie a bow, to get it the way I want it, I always end up having to tie it upside down. I don't know why I didn't just go right away to trying to tie it upside down. I figured, okay, let me try it one more time, looping it, the opposite way of what I normally do. Yeah, no, it's still like twisty and sideways. So here I am, upside down bow, tying it the way I would normally tie my shoes, and it turns out perfect. Why upside down? I don't know. I don't know what I do wrong when I'm trying to tie bows right side up. Clearly I'm backwards. But I just went ahead and futzed with it until I had it the way I wanted it, and then I dovetailed the ends. This particular ribbon, because of that mesh in the middle, it's a little bit of a challenge to dovetail, if I'm quite honest, trimming the ends of it, but we persevered and managed and got her done. So once I had that set, I was ready to add my flowers. I just did a really quick bouquet with a bunch of different colored roses that I had in my stash and futzed with them until I got them the way that I wanted them. I didn't cut any of these apart. I just bent over the ends to get them to the right length, tucked them in, and just kind of wrapped them around each other and positioned them the way that I wanted them.
DIY number 6.
All right, this is a canvas from Michaels. It was part of a 7-pack. It's a 12 by 12. It was $12.99 for the pack of 7, so a little less than $2 a piece. And I have this piece that was my inspiration. It's something that I saw on michaels.com. I believe the original price was like $31.99. It was on sale for $19.99. We're going to make it for $2. a little less than $2. So I went through the process of identifying which colors of chalk paint that I wanted to use. These are chalk paint markers this time. So I'm going through all my pinks. As you know, I am very visual, so I gotta see it all laid out and figure out what colors I want to be using. I'm just comparing it to the piece, and I was trying to decide if that was gray or black that the words were in. I ultimately decided on this gray color. I believe it is just called slate gray in my box. I think that's what it is. It's the darker gray in my pack of Arteza chalk paint markers. But I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get them to be the same height and nicely spaced. And I ultimately decided I was going to create myself some guidelines with masking tape. Now I went ahead and taped off the bottom, and then I used the tape to create the spacing as well. I found that two widths of the tape were exactly what I needed for my spacing to have the letters be the height that I was hoping for them to be based on the little sample that I had done. So you can see there, that's perfect. So I did go ahead and start using that masking tape as my spacer also between my first and second rows, or my bottom and middle rows. But I quickly realized that that was going to leave too much of a gap between my rows. So I went back into my stash and I grabbed out this crafting tape. I think that's what it's called, but it's super skinny. It's like 1/4 of an inch wide. And I'm going to use that to create my guideline in between my rows. So I have 3 rows. I'll need 2 spaces, one between rows 1 and 2 and one between rows 2 and 3. And then I can just leave the masking tape for the other sections. I'm not quite sure why I decided to show you so much of this taping, but it'll go quickly, I promise. So using the spacer tape again here, and I did ultimately recoup all of this tape to use for a future project. They're not going to have any paint on them or anything like that. They are literally just used for guidelines in this instance. So there was nothing wrong with the tape, and I opted to put it right back on the spool. Is it a spool of tape? Anyway, you can see here I'm already recuperating some of it. Recouping. My goodness. Went ahead and taped off the top, and now we are ready to rock and roll. All right, so here I go. I am just gonna pause my commentary again so that you don't have this gravelly voice in your ear, and I can clear my throat again before I come back on. I love this. I think it's so sweet. But I did have a little spot where I had a little boo-boo with my paint marker there, and so I was trying to scrape it off a little bit, but I just went and grabbed my isopropyl alcohol. It's the 91% that I'm using. This is just the end of a paintbrush. I applied a little bit of the alcohol, and now I'm using a paper towel to try to wipe it away. It was working, but I decided it was going to work a little bit better if I wrapped the paper towel around that paintbrush handle, dip that in the alcohol, and then use that again to just kind of wipe away that excess paint. And it worked like a charm. So again, it was just my 91% isopropyl alcohol. You can get it in any drugstore, Walmart, wherever. But that does clean up acrylic paint. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 7.
All right, I have an actual chocolate silk screen piece there, and this is a little crate from the Dollar Tree, or little, would you call this a crate? It's not really a crate. It's a mini little tray, I suppose, but I'm going to be using the back side of it as my sign. Now, in the past, I have always painted my pieces first. This time I decided I wanted to try and see how this would look on the wood tone, and then I figured I would paint the sides and perhaps give it a frame with paint. So I just made sure that it was all nice and centered. Coming in with my candy apple red again, and I'm just going to squeegee it on, making sure that I'm working relatively quickly. I tend to work a little bit slowly sometimes, and then I found with the chalk paste, it ends up drying very quickly and sticking inside of the transfer, and so then when you lift it off, it pulls up the paint with it. So that was why I pulled that up real quick. And I will do the same thing with each of these little pieces. So as I go, just going to do a section, lift it up so that I make sure that I don't end up having it dry on me before I'm ready to take the whole thing off, just to make sure that my design turns out the way that I want it. And right here, I made a little bit of a faux pas because I used some of that chalk paint or chalk paste that had been sitting there for a second. That's how quickly it dries, you guys, because it wasn't there very long, right? But I had applied that to that F in the word free, and then I had to go back in for some more of the chalk paste. And that part that I first applied with that drier chalk paste, it ended up sticking a little bit inside the transfer. So that letter is not perfect. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on screen. I can see it in person and it bothers me. But yeah, so just a word to the wise, you want to work quickly with these transfers and the chalk paste because it does dry really quick. All right, so I've got my words on here, and I'm going to go ahead and use my Adirondack chalk paint to create a border. And then I will also be painting the sides. Now, I could have taped this off to create a really nice, super straight line. I opted not to because I felt like I was going to end up having to tape over my lettering, and I didn't want to put tape over that for fear that it might lift the chalk paste. If you're not familiar with Chalk Couture, their chalk paste is washable, so I don't know how it would work given that I've put it on this particular piece and it's right on wood, but generally when you use their pieces like those hearts I did earlier, you can wash them off and reuse them and decorate them in different ways later on. So that's kind of cool. But I'm just being really careful and making my lines as straight as I can. They are probably not perfect, but you have to look at it pretty close, in my humble opinion, to tell that they're not super straight. So I think I did an okay job with that. But I just went ahead and made sure that all of my lines were as straight as I could get them, and then I painted each of the 4 edges just to finish this off and make it nice and neat to be going on the tray. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 8.
All right, these are some little buckets from the Dollar Tree. I believe they did come in a pack of 3, and I'm going to be using 2 of them. I also have a bunch of little random things out of the drawer in my stash that is all things Valentines that I have to craft with. These were just little random pieces, some of which I'm not really sure where I got them. The grapevine heart that's there was in a pack of 3 or 5 from the Dollar Tree. I've had that for quite some time. It's the last one in my stash. And then these other things, I'm not sure where these came from. I don't know. I've had them for a while. Not sure where I got them, or if perhaps one of my subscribers sent them to me. But I am going to be pulling them apart a little bit and piecing things together to create something that's going to have a little bit of height for the tray. So with the pieces that we've created so far, they're all kind of lower sitting pieces, and I wanted something that was going to help raise the eye, so to speak. So I went and grabbed my little paint marker because I had that white, some of the foam was visible. The styrofoam, these are styrofoam hearts covered in a red glitter, and for whatever reason, I know for the larger heart I'd pulled the little ribbon. I guess it was kind of like an ornament. I'd pulled that out and it left some of the foam visible. I'm not sure why the other smaller heart had that. I don't recall what it was a part of, or why it might have had some of the bottom glitter removed, but took care of that with the chalk paint. And now I'm going to transfer some of the beads from one of the other skewers over to the main skewer. I'm probably making this harder than it needs to be. I was trying to just have it slide from one to the other. Yeah. But I think I have about 9 of these beads on here. They were already pre-painted. And now I'm going to add a little bow. So I'm going to take the ribbon from the piece that I've completely pulled apart and tie my bow on this. I'm going to actually tie my bow upside down because for whatever reason I am backwards, and when I tie my bows upside down they turn out right side up. So I've just learned from experience to do it that way. And I'll futz around with it for a minute, and once I have it the way I want it, I'll go ahead and trim off the edges and just cutting them at an angle so that they don't fray. And now I'll be ready to try and figure out how I want to set it up in these little buckets. So I did know that I wanted to use floral foam, so I went and grabbed that from my stash. I also grabbed some moss that you might have seen there. I've got my old kitchen knife that I keep in my stash specifically for this purpose, and I'm going to cut it down into pieces that will fit inside the bucket. And I want it to be a snug fit so that it doesn't wobble around. Now you can certainly use your hot glue and glue it in. I actually do end up doing that for one of them, but for this first one, it was nice and snug in there. Now that hot glue that I put on to hold the moss, I made sure that I was leaving the center free of hot glue because I want to be able to put my skewer down inside of there. And if I have hot glue in the middle of that, the skewer is not going to go through the hot glue. Once that's dry, it gets really hard, as I'm sure you probably know, and it's not going to work. All right, so that one's done, and now I am ready to do number 2. So I've got my bucket set up, and I'm just trying to figure out how I want to make this one work. My thought is I'm going to just add the little heart to the skewer and have it stand upright. And I did succeed in doing that. It took me a minute to get the skewer wedged into the right part of the grapevine heart so that it was standing up straight and not kind of leaning or at an angle. So once I got that in, I'm just trying to figure out how I want to put this together. I already know that I want to use a special ribbon that I'd gotten from Amazon a couple of years ago, I think. It looks like little leaves. I think it's so pretty, and I'm going to be gluing it to the base and then wrapping it up and around. I had been trying to decide whether I wanted to put the moss down first or do this first, and I decided I wanted to do this first so that the moss will actually help hide the base of that ribbon. So I'm going to just wrap it around and around the skewer, and then I'm going to measure off what I think is the right amount for wrapping it around the grapevine heart as well. So I'll go ahead and start wrapping it. I'm going to turn it on its side here in a second so that you can see a little bit better what I'm doing. But I'm just going to wrap it around just not super close together, but whatever makes my eye happy, right? So I do a lot just by eye. And then once I got it back down to the base, I'm trying to tuck it into the grapevine, and I succeeded in one spot, but then the other spot kept flipping back up. It didn't want to grab it. So I'll just use a little tiny bit of hot glue right there. And I mean, like a smear of hot glue, not even a little glob. It was just a tiny bit so that I could tack down the end of the ribbon. And so now that that's done, I'm ready to add my moss. So I'll go ahead and put that in and just make sure that that is nice and covered so that the floral foam is camouflaged. And then I grabbed out this ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and make another bow at the base of my heart. So do the bow upside down again. If I can get it wrapped around there, and then I will make sure that I trim off the ends as well. Now this one, it didn't want to stay where it was supposed to be. It kept kind of almost flopping over on itself, so I did add a little bit of hot glue to the base of the heart and flipped the little knot up onto the glue so that the bow will stay where it's supposed to be. Once I had that done, I went ahead and trimmed it off. And this one is pretty much done as well. Oh yes, this one was not a snug. I mentioned before that I did end up gluing it. There you go. So I glued that down, put the moss back in it, and it was good to go. And I didn't photo these together. I did them separate. So here they are.
DIY number 9.
All right, I have some watercolor paper that I'm going to be using for this project, and I'm going to be using a method that was shared with me by a friend of mine, Rebecca, before the holidays, and I had wanted to use it, but I ended up not finding time to do it for one of my videos for Christmas, so I figured why not do it now. So I'm going to be making a card. I am marking off the 4-inch mark down the center of my paper here because this is an 8 by 8 inch piece of cardstock, for lack of a better term. It's a heavier weight, and so I'm going to be making a card with a watercolor design. Just trying to get it folded in half right now and making sure that my edges are lined up as best as I can and creasing my card. So now that I know where my front is, I'm going to use this cute little heart-shaped cookie cutter. to create my design. I just have a paper plate here. I'm grabbing out my watercolors. These are nothing special. They are from the Dollar Tree. I've had them in my stash for a while. And adding in some water to the colors that I want to use. I started to put it with the blue and then I opted not to. I realized I had the purple there, but I did add to the white and the red as well. And now I've got some little paintbrushes. I'm going to work the water into each of those colors and transfer some of the color over to my plate. Now, obviously you can't really see the white, and it's really going to be meant to create some pink here because for whatever reason, my little Dollar Tree palette does not have pink. So I just opted to make some with my white and red. And it worked out just fine. So now I'm going to put some red here as well. And then I will also be adding in the purple and I'll kind of like blend them together at the edges. So I'm creating approximately the shape of my cookie cutter. Or at least a circular area where I know that the edges of my cookie cutter will be able to pick up paint. Hopefully that makes sense. And I just put red paint in my white little tray inadvertently, but but I hope you can see what I'm doing here. I'm dipping my cookie cutter into the watercolor, and I was finding I needed to kind of go back over it because I didn't quite get enough paint the first time. So I was just really careful to line it right up over top again and did it a second time. Now, I wish I had been a little bit more careful with my positioning because I ended up having too much space at the top and then not enough space at the bottom, but they gradually, I guess, got a little closer together, so maybe I can call it part of the design. I did it on purpose, but I really didn't. But you know what? It's a handmade card and it is part of its charm. That's what I'm going to go with. You know, homemade is never perfect, but it's homemade and it's special that way, right? So now I have my water brush from the Dollar Tree. And I am kind of running along the lines of the watercolor here and helping them to bleed into the heart. Bleeding heart. I didn't really mean to make that pun, but if I had to do it again, I probably would have grabbed a flat brush and used regular water and taken the flat edge of the brush and kind of positioned it along the edge of the watercolor and swept it in towards the center of the heart. Hopefully that makes sense. But this worked just fine. It just took a little bit more effort, but it worked out perfectly well. So if you have a flat brush and you don't have this, that is definitely a good option. And like I said, I would probably opt for that if I had to do it again, or in the future when I do it again, because I actually enjoyed this process. I think it's so super pretty. I really like the way that the watercolor just flows into the water itself as you place the water down. There's just not a whole lot of color deposited here, so there's not a lot to bleed in. So what I ended up doing is coming back in and depositing some additional color on my design just slightly around the edges to help create that bleeding effect. So just working my way around each of them, I'm making sure that I have some water going through the hearts. So it was a little bit saturated, probably more so than it needed to be, but this is my first time attempting this kind of style of painting, so I was learning as I went. But here you can see adding some more of that red, and you can see it just bleeding right in towards the center where I have the water, and it did not stray outside of my little lines that had been created with the cookie cutter. It's kind of a neat thing where the paint just goes where the water is set. So kind of a neat medium to work with. I'm just adding a little bit more bleed around the edges of the heart. and getting it to where I want it, adding in some more purple now. I had just added the red at the bottom and now adding in some of the purple around the top area. But I think these look so super pretty, and it's a really soft look, but it kind of gives it a little bit dimension, almost helps make them look curved in a way. So I helped them to dry a little bit. My paper was warping here, and so what I wanted to do is set something down heavy on top of it. So I got it to a point where I felt like I could put a paper towel over it and not mess up my design. So went ahead and I folded it in half, set my paper towel down. Now I'm going to grab a board to set down on top of it, and then I'll put something heavy on top of the board just to help the paper flatten out. I left it overnight, came back to it the next day. It's all set and it's nice and flat. And now I have these markers that my daughter was actually getting rid of, and I snagged them because, of course, anything craft related, I'm gonna take if I can get my hands on it. If it's no longer of use for someone else. But this is a dual-ended marker, and it's this end has the chisel kind of end to it. I feel like I'm not making sense. But I was thinking I could try to do like a calligraphy style font with it. I think it was probably the way I was holding the marker. It wasn't working out for me. So I tried a few more times, and when I did get it to go well, it was just way thicker for the wider part of the font than I liked. So I opted not to use that for this. Then I was using the fine point, just kind of testing out some different things. I finally went to a script font, and I decided that that was the way that I wanted to go. Now, please keep in mind that I do speed this up about 2.5 times. I am going much slower than it appears. This is not my handwriting, you guys. This is me drawing the letters like I would draw a picture. I'm taking my time, I'm thinking about the shape of every single letter, and I am drawing it the way that I want it to appear. So hopefully that it kind of helps you. I always laugh when people compliment my handwriting in these videos because my handwriting is really pretty atrocious. So when I do hand lettering, I take my time and I'm really just drawing the letters. But here I've got a bunch of little decorative buttons. I decided I wanted to jazz up the card a little bit more with something else sweet. I don't want it to be overly feminine because I am planning on giving this card to my husband for Valentine's Day. So I want it to be sweet and decorated, but I don't want to be putting like bows all over it because he I think might appreciate the buttons a little bit more. So these were self-adhesive, but they've kind of lost a lot of their stick. So I am using my hot glue just to fasten these on. I just worked my way down and attached each of the buttons. And that was really it for this project. I think this is super sweet. I will definitely be using this method with the watercolor in the future. And I'm all set with my Valentine's card. I just have to come up with something sweet to say on the inside.
DIY number 10.
Okay, this is a round from a pack of 6, I believe, that I'd gotten from the Hobby Lobby. It was like the Woodpile brand. And I am going to be painting just the middle portion. I guess it's maybe more than a third of it, but I'm painting that with my Adirondack white. And once it was dry, I'm going to tape it off so that I can paint the tops and bottoms a different color. Excuse me, I must be dealing with some allergies or something. I've turned off the microphone a couple of times to try and clear my throat, so I apologize. All right, so I did go over the tape with the white. Hopefully you saw that. That is to help alleviate any bleeding underneath the tape, because if it bleeds, and it did bleed a little bit, it's going to bleed the white onto the white and you won't see it. So now this is my elephant chalk paint that I'm going over that, and then I'll be able to peel that tape away and you'll see I've got a nice sharp line because any of my bleeds were bled in white. So going ahead and peeling that away, and then I will help it to dry again. So I'll just use my heat gun on that. And once it's dry, I'm going to be ready to do my writing in the middle. Now, if you have a vinyl cutter, you can certainly create, excuse me, a stencil for this. You can also use a stencil if you have one. I opted to do hand lettering for this. So you'll have to see what you think of the end result. But I'm just using pencil at first, because I wasn't super confident that I was going to be able to get the spacing right. And I wanted the option of being able to erase it and fix it versus committing right away with the paint markers. So I am using a font similar to a piece that I had seen as inspiration online. To be honest, I can't remember exactly where I saw it, but I thought it was super pretty. And so I wanted to see if I might be able to attempt something similar. So I went ahead and grabbed out a couple of my chalk paints. These are not chalk. These are acrylic, excuse me. But I guess chalk paint is also acrylic, but these were how do I say it? They're not as matte as chalk paint markers are. So I'm going to go ahead and trace over my pencil lines. I did have to go over it a few times just to make sure that the pencil was completely hidden, because these are not quite as opaque as the chalk paint markers that I have, but it was fine. It all worked out really well in the end. I'm making it a little bit thicker in some places, largely on the downstrokes, and just going over that pencil line, and also the ability to make it wider in some areas gives an opportunity to fix some of the imperfections, so to speak. So I'm going to continue to go over this, and I will just take a pause with my remarks and let you watch what I'm doing here. And as you can see, I did go over the other font a couple of times as well. Once I had that all done, I was ready to create a ribbon. I have 3 ribbons here that I'm going to be putting together. The burlap one, I believe, is a 2.5-inch ribbon, and the other 2 are 1.5 inch. The purple one is a satin ribbon, and then the white one is obviously a sheer with satin lining on the edges. I had cut them all to the same length. The way that I measured the length, I took that burlap ribbon first and I created a bow like what I'm doing here just on its own, figured out how much ribbon I was going to need, trimmed that off, and then I measured the other 2 ribbons to match. So I'm just going to go ahead and futz around with it until I have my loops the way that I want them, all the same length. And then I'm going to take this other burlap ribbon, which is actually the same exact style ribbon, just thinner, as the thinner than the other burlap ribbon that's there. They're the same texture, same weave, same edging. Just one is wider than the other. So I'm going to tie the bow off in the middle with the narrower ribbon. Just get all of my loops arranged again the way that I want them. Make sure that that's tied off nice and tight. And I'm going to let those tails hang up over top, because in a little bit I'm going to actually use that to create the hanger for this sign. So I'm going to go ahead and fluff up my ribbon, and then I will dovetail the ends there. I'm just putting all of the ribbons together, getting them centered, fold them in half, and then go ahead and dovetail them that way. And then I'll do the same thing with the other side. I'm just going to get them all lined up. I'll fold them in half. And what's interesting, this white ribbon that I have on top, when it's by itself, it is horribly difficult to cut in a straight line. It just shifts away from you. So maybe I'll pair it up with other ribbon going forward when I have to dovetail the ends. But now I have some boxwood picks that I'm going to tuck in underneath my bow. And I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that they are lined up and where I want them, and that their stems were going to be nice and camouflaged by the bow. And then I'll come in with a whole bunch of hot glue. Now, at first I thought I'd be able to just drop the hot glue down over it and it might flow between the stems and anchor it. It didn't really do that. So as I realized that that wasn't quite happening, I went ahead and lifted it up and tucked some hot glue underneath there. I was using generous amounts, so this is going to be pretty secure. And then I went ahead and took advantage of the hot glue that was already on there to apply my bow. I just held that for a moment to let it cool so that I knew that my bow wasn't going to shift. And then I went back and got some additional ribbon in the same 3 types and put it together for this little loop. I'm going to hot glue this together so that it doesn't come apart. And I'm going to apply some glue to the center there and set that down. Now that bow looked super cute even before this step, so you don't necessarily have to do it that way. I was just trying to follow the inspiration piece, but looking at this video, it actually looked really pretty with just that plain burlap knot. But this was also going to give it more coverage. So now with those tails, as you can see, I tied them off at the end, trimmed them off just at an angle, and that's my hanger.
DIY number 11.
Okay, another inspiration picture. This one was also on Michael's website. I believe it was something like $52, something around there. But this is a piece of MDF. It was a scrap that I had in the garage that Rich had cut down for me into a bunch of different shapes and sizes. And I'm going to give it a coat of a white Adirondack chalk paint. Now, this project, I am going to be using watercolors. But I didn't want to use watercolor paper this time. I wanted to try something different. I wanted to see how it might work on the chalk paint. So I also wanted some texture to this, though. I didn't want it to be super smooth. So once I had this first coat of chalk paint down, I went ahead and waited for it to dry. It might have had a little help from my heat gun. And then I used this brush that is normally used for stencils, and I'm just stippling on a pretty good layer of the chalk paint. I don't know if you can really see it here. You'll be able to see the texture much better a little bit later when I show you the end product. But just stippling it on and creating a texture to this background. So I have my Dollar Tree watercolors out, and I am adding a little bit of water to the yellow, the red, the green, and the blue. And now I'm just going to smoosh it around a little bit to get that paint ready to use, just kind of mixing the paint with the water so that it is nice and saturated. And now I have my Dollar Tree water brush. So this little, the handle of this is filled with water and it just comes down through the brush. I'll tell you what, guys, it was really hard for me to see the water on the chalk paint. I don't know if it's because of the matte finish or the fact that it didn't change color at all with the water on it the way that paper might, but I ended up just squeezing it. You could probably see I was squeezing it out of the brush and just making sure that I had ample amounts of water and doing my best to create a heart shape. I think I ultimately did a good job with it, but it was not an easy thing to see for sure. But now I'm just going to go ahead and apply my watercolors. I did go back and, as you saw there, and apply some water here and there where I felt like I needed more of it. It definitely wasn't bleeding the way that it would on paper. I don't know if it's because I didn't have enough water down. I felt like I had a lot of water on the surface, but it definitely behaved differently on the chalk paint than you would expect for it to behave on paper. Now I wanted to start blending this here. I was realizing I needed to be careful not to muddy up the paint colors. Red plus green equals brown, mud. The green and blue is pretty when mixed together. The yellow and the red is pretty when mixed together. And as I edited this video, I was realizing I should have added some more yellow to the center of the heart between the red and the green. That would have just helped me out a little bit. Instead, I just continued to apply more of the color. So it ended up being a little bit more saturated than the inspiration picture. It wasn't as soft of a watercolor, what would you call this? Art piece? I guess you can call this art. I don't really think of myself as an artist, but I do have fun dabbling. But I just continued to apply the paint until I got it pretty much to where I wanted it. I'm going to go back in and add some more yellow here. And then I will add the other elements that I saw in that inspiration picture in just a second. Just adding some more water, hoping it helps kind of blend everything. But I'm going to quiet myself for a moment and let you watch this as well. Okay, so once I had it the way that I wanted it, I waited for it to dry, and now I'm going to tape off the edges because I want to create a faux frame for the design. So I've got my oatmeal chalk paint. I believe this is Home Decor. And just going to go ahead and I'm brushing it away from the edge of the tape to avoid having any bleeding. So here I'm also making sure that I get the edges. I just went around and did one side at a time. And once I had that last side done, we were good to go. I think this is pretty. I'm going to flip it right side up for you in just a second so you can see it. And then we'll go ahead and add a hanger onto the back of it. So just going to make sure it's dry first. This is a little picture hanger that I had in my stash. I usually like to kind of work the tip of the screwdriver into the wood a little bit to create a divot for the screw to fit into. It just makes it easier for it to catch. But let me know what you think.
DIY number 12.
Okay, so I have a little Dollar Tree owl wood cutout. I pulled off that tag. I should have pulled off the other one, but I will in a little bit. Now, I was showing you a bunch of little wooden cutouts. Those larger hearts obviously came in a pack with little foam tape adhesive on it, so I'm pulling those off. The smaller ones all came in a pack together. It was a whole bunch of different shaped of wood pieces that I'd gotten from the Dollar Tree. It was a really great buy because I've been using those little pieces on all kinds of things. But I'm going to go ahead and give our little owl friend here a coat of my crimson chalk paint. Here, I'm finally pulling off that label. I should have known that I was going to want to take that off in the first place, but got that off and gave it one good coat of paint on both sides. While he was drying, I went ahead and painted all of the little hearts in my vintage Victorian pink. And then this is Sunny Porch that I'm doing the circles in. Once everything was dry, I went ahead and started trying to lay everything out. And just lined up all of my little hearts to get things the way that I wanted to kind of make the body, I guess, of the owl. So we're decorating him here and creating his form and his shape. I was trying to decide which way I wanted his little wings to go, and finally settled on that way. Then I've got my little googly eyes I'm going to be using for his eyes. And one thing I've always found with the googly eyes, when I use hot glue, for whatever reason, it freezes the little googly inside. And I don't really know why, but I'm just messing with his beak, trying to decide how I want to do that. I realized that I had his eyes way too close together. He's so stinking cute. So I'm going to go ahead and apply his eyeball. And because they do end up freezing, I think it must melt the back of it and end up sticking to whatever the googly part is on the inside. That's the only thing I can figure out because of the heat. But I did want to make sure I adhered them to the backing before I committed to adhering the backing to the owl's body or head, because I wanted to make sure that I positioned the eyes to look the way that I wanted them. I didn't want him to be cross-eyed or anything like that. So got that taken care of, and then I went ahead and started applying all of the little wood pieces, including his eyes here, to his body the way that I have them placed. So just went through one at a time, got those all adhered. And I'll speed through this so you don't have to watch me put down every single little one. This is the last piece. And I'm thinking he's looking super cute, but I did feel like he was missing something. There was just something more that he needed. So I went back to my stash and I grabbed a couple of more of those little heart shapes. and I gave them a coat of, this is called salmon coral or coral salmon. I always get it mixed up. I think it's salmon coral. I thought maybe his little beak could go with the salmon coral as well. And I'm applying them, but thinking that the color isn't quite what I want it to be. It's blending a little bit too much into that red background. So for the beak, I went ahead and grabbed my mustard chalk paint, and I'm going to go ahead and just go over that carefully now that everything is adhered. And then I used Java chalk paint on his little ears, and I was happier with that. I did actually end up using a little bit of the Java on his beak here in a second, just to kind of create a little bit of shading and shadow along the edges, and hopefully give it a little bit of a sense of roundness and not being quite so flat. But you can see, and it's more like dry brushing than anything else. I'm not applying a lot of paint, but just a little bit to the edges there. And I think he is super, super cute. Once he was dry, I flipped him over. I've got a little piece of twine or jute cord. I'm not really sure what you'd refer to this one as. I had taken it off another project recently and had it in my stash. I try to reuse things as much as I can just to save waste. And applied that with some hot glue, so I have a little hanger for him. And once that was all cool, he was ready to hang up.
DIY number 13.
Okay, I have a whole bunch of different hearts from my stash, lots of bits and pieces, plus this little corrugated sign. Corrugated, I think that's the right word. And yeah, there's another word for it with the type of metal it is that I always forget. But at any rate, I've got these little hearts. This keychain heart was in a pack, I think of 3, maybe 4, but I had 3 of them in my stash and it was already open, so I wasn't sure how many it came with originally. The other one was a pack of 8 from, it was supposed to be like a garland, I think. And then you could see that the red heart came from a pack of, I think it was more than a dozen various hearts in colors and shapes. The medium-sized heart, I painted with the Adirondack white, and then that's my vintage Victorian pink that I was using. I grabbed out my twine, and I was creating a heart to put on the front of this sign, and also to which I was going to attach the hearts, but I decided it was a little too thin. It didn't have enough substance. So I set it aside, knowing that I wanted to use it for my hanger. And I grabbed my jute cord, which is a little heavier, so creating just a regular tie your shoelace bow, and I'm going to attach that to my corrugated heart here with some hot glue. Just going to place a little bit of glue right there in the divot and drop that knot right on top of it. And it hid the glue perfectly. It couldn't have been better. So went ahead and got that secured, and then I was going to be ready to attach my little hearts to the design. So trimmed that off, and I'm going to glue this one end to the back of my little red heart, just using a little bit of hot glue there, tucking that in, and then I'll apply a little bit more hot glue over the top just to kind of create a seal for it. And then I'll let that just rest there once I was satisfied that it wasn't going to pop off, and let it cool the rest of the way. So now once my painted hearts were done, and it's already bothering me that I didn't finish painting the back of that pink heart. I'm going to have to go back and do that. It's where I was holding it, and I just didn't bother to do it. And yeah, true to my nature, it's already bothering me. So rest assured, I'll go back and finish that, even though you won't really see it. I'll pop it off later and do it. But I went ahead and tied a little bow. I wasn't crazy about that look because I wanted to have the other little tail for the bow. So I undid that. I'm just going to tie it onto here in the regular way. making sure that I've got it at the length that I want it. I'm going to trim that off and tuck the end into that little hole with some hot glue so that it doesn't come undone, because I only did the first part of the knot. I tied it once. I didn't tie it a second time to actually knot it. So that's what's actually going to keep it secure. And then that end that I cut off took me a couple of tries here, but I went ahead and tied another little shoelace bow. It was trying to come unraveled, so I had to kind of twist it up a little bit so that it would stay properly together. But got that bow tied, and then I'm going to tuck that right on top of that little hole there to camouflage the hole and bring that all together. I love this. I think it's so super sweet. But now I'm going to be ready to attach my hanger. Now there is already a hanger built into the back of this, so I'm going to loop my twine right through there, and I'm going to create a longer loop on this to use for my hanger, and I'm going to be using some beads to decorate this. So before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and tie this off and pull it nice and tight so that it'll be nicely secured. I did actually end up going back and adding some hot glue to that as well, just to keep it in place and for some extra security, so to speak. So grabbed my beads. I have white, gray, a black and white buffalo check. There are some black beads in there as well. I decided I did want to knot it because I don't want the beads sliding back behind the metal sign part. But I didn't end up using any of the black beads. You certainly could. I just decided that I wanted to have a little bit of a softer look, and I didn't want the solid black to be part of this. So I alternated the white, the buffalo check, and the gray. And I did that a couple of times, and then I ended up finishing off with the white. Once I had that on there, I knotted it once again right at the top. And that was that. Now, when I did hang it up, I felt like it was kind of limp. I wanted there to be a little bit more of a bounce in the way that the hearts looked on here. It's the only way I can describe it. So I used my little pop dot tape. It's basically foam tape that's double-sided, and I applied it to the back of my hearts and then applied that to the sign in the place where I wanted it. And just pulling the backing off of there, making sure I have enough of the adhesive dots on there, and pressing that down. And now it is finally the way I want it. But let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 14.
Okay, I have that cookie cutter again. We're going to be using it for a paint pouring project. So I have a bunch of my Arteza acrylic paints. I'm going to try to remember all these colors so I can tell you exactly what I'm using. Most of these are pearl paints, which is like a metallic. Well, I guess it's more like a pearlized. They look a little metallic to me, but this is my titanium white. I'm going to be using titanium white is going to have the most amount of paint. So I'm probably going to be using about twice as much white as everything else. That is the pearl lilac. And if you see other little hands helping me there, Elena is here helping out with this project. She's home for the winter break and wanted to craft with me. And it was really nice to have her company while I was working on these projects and getting to catch up with her a little bit. And I'm just really happy to have her home for a little bit. But the other colors that I'm using here, this is the royal purple, the other bronze color. Oh, and that's my Floetrol. I'm going to be adding this into each of my paint colors. I'm doing about a 1:4 ratio with each of these, and then I'll just get them stirred up really well. So it was the royal purple. That bronze color is called copper gold. I totally missed what that last one was, but I will make sure that I tell you the colors as we see them here, so that again, you know exactly what it is that I'm using. Now with the white, I ended up filling this a little bit more than I should have, and as a result, when I stirred this up, I was not quite, I didn't realize it at the time, but I didn't quite get all of the paint stirred into it. So you're going to see later on me adding a little bit more Floetrol to the remaining paint in the bottom of my cup. But at any rate, I went ahead and got all of those stirred up, and once they were all completely stirred, I was just checking for the consistency, make sure that they were going to be the right thickness, I guess is a good way to put it, so that they were going to be able to pour properly. So now I'm getting my little canvas set up. This is just from the Dollar Tree. And I'm going to go ahead and apply some of my titanium white just to have a base coat. Now, if I had to do this over again, I would not do it this way. I would go to my next step first, and then before I started removing the cookie cutter, I would put like a pool of paint around it. And the reason for that is that my paint ended up going a little bit underneath this white coat. You're going to see in a second what I'm going to be doing. But it just ended up hiding some of the color. It turned out fine in the end because I ended up doing other things. And actually it turned out with a pretty neat design in the end. But at any rate, if I had to do it again, I would probably not put the base coat of white down first, but just hitting that with my torch. And I'm going to drop that cookie cutter right into the middle. I'm going to be filling up my cookie cutter. All right, so this is my royal purple that I'm putting down. This is the only one that's not pearlized or pearl. This one, I believe, is the pearl magenta. Yes. Pearl magenta, a little bit more of the titanium white in here. And I wish I had put less paint each time. This is the pearl raspberry. I would have liked to have layered these more, but I ended up with just one layer of each of these colors. That was the copper gold, more titanium white, and now I have my pearl lilac. So you can see it's starting to bleed out, but you can also see that it's kind of going underneath the white paint. So I'm just basically lifting and dropping the cookie cutter to let a little bit of paint out at a time. And it looks pretty cool, but can you see how it's kind of underneath the white paint? And the color's bleeding through a little bit, but again, if I had to do it again, I would have filled up the cookie cutter, and then right before I started lifting it, I would have put a pool of white paint around the edge just to help with allowing it to move the way that I am now moving it. So I was hoping to try to salvage that heart shape in the design. I ended up not being able to do that, but like I said, it did end up being a really cool design. I wasn't super thrilled with it at first. Like right here, I'm looking at that giant open space that is just the pearl, I want to call it orchid, lilac, the pearl lilac. And I just, yeah, that big space right there. I'm not thrilled with that right now. I love the top part of this with all of the colors that are flowing there, and the very bottom left corner is really cool too. But that middle section was really kind of bugging me. So I asked Elena to go and grab a balloon out of my stash, and while she was doing that, I hit this with my torch again. I wish that I had had time to mix the paints and let them sit for a little while, just to let some of the air bubbles come to the surface and leave the paint, but it worked out just fine. So we blew up the balloon, and I am doing little balloon kisses. This is another technique I have never done before, so I don't know if I was doing it right. I felt like I had a lot of paint on the canvas. It's possible that I just had too much paint on here, but I continued to go ahead and do my little balloon kisses. I was wishing that I had had a different canvas to put the paint onto that I was removing from this. But again, right now I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh boy, what have I done with this? I was thinking this might turn out to be a fail, but in the end, once it was dry, Rich says that he can see people in it. And I'm actually going to call this Angels in the Heavens, I think. But you'll have to take a look at it. It's going to dry completely different from what you see right now. But you'll have to take a look at the final picture and let me know if you see what we see. I would love to get your comments about what you see here.
DIY number 15.
All right, Dollar Tree vase. I had so much paint left over, you guys. I had to do another project. So here I am. I've wanted to do a vase pour for a long time. This turned out so good. I am in love with this vase, but at any rate, I just was getting it cleaned up. Used a wipe and then just wiped it down with some paper towel, make sure that it was nice and dry. I have a little solo cup there. I need to figure out a different kind of cup, you guys, because this almost turned into a natural disaster in my craft room with the cup that I'm using. Anyway, this is another little canvas. This one actually is from Michael's, I believe. I think I'd gotten a whole pack of I want to say it was like 20 different canvases in all different sizes, and I think this was from that pack. So at first I started pouring my excess paint over one at a time. And I was thinking, I would just do a straight pour with each of these and see what it ended up doing. As I was going, I was like, this isn't quite what I had in mind. It wasn't doing it for me. But of course, true to my style, I continued to try to push it a little bit and see if I could get it to do something more interesting. And I'm looking at it thinking, yeah, no, I need to mix my paints. But I decided I needed to have at least one of each color on here before I did that. But I was watching it pool around the canvas and thinking that it looked really, really pretty. So I went ahead, I needed that copper gold on there. But I went ahead and layered my paints in my cup. This time I was able to do multiple layers with the colors and just going a little bit at a time with each of them. Same colors as the last project, but just a different method, trying to use up some of the paint that I had mixed. But here we go. I really do appreciate all of you who are still here watching and visiting with me. Up here I'm going to add my Floetrol. That was the paint that I realized was still heavy in the bottom of that cup and hadn't gotten mixed in properly. So getting some Floetrol mixed in there to make sure that it's usable and the right consistency for pouring. But I do appreciate every single one of you. So thank you for being here. I hope that you all had a wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year to all of you, and thank you again for being here. But once I got all of this layered, I am going to go to real time now. So no longer 2.5 times. This is real time, showing you how I am pouring over this vase, just going in a circular motion. I am sure that there is a name for what I am doing, but I am not that well versed in the terminology with the pour painting yet. But I am loving this design. And these colors, most of them are, actually, I think all of them are semi-opaque or semi-translucent. So only the white, because I did go back and look at them all afterwards, because it dried so much lighter than what you see right now. I was amazed at the difference, but only the white was completely opaque. Everything else was like the half opaque symbol on the little containers. So yeah, but just really, really pretty. And at the end here, I'm going to start doing it in a heart shape. I figured just give a little nod to the heart on the bottom of the vase. I wasn't sure if it was going to maintain the shape in the design through the drying process, because it was going to continue to fall over the edges and drip down. But I figured, why not? So getting that heart shape in there, you can see all of the colors on the canvas now. They look so pretty. Just getting the last of the paint on there. And now I'm going to let it continue to flow for a little bit, because all of the paint that's falling down off of the vase, I want to be able to use it on the canvas. So just going to be leaving that for a moment. I'm going to go and grab another pair of gloves, and I'll go back to my 2.5 times the speed here, so that we aren't feeling like we're sitting here watching the paint dry. But I am just right now thinking about where I'm going to set this to dry. I end up just putting it to the left of my work surface here, so you're going to kind of see other things while I'm working on the canvas, or see the surface that I placed it on. But this is where I almost had an issue. So I'm wiping the drips along the bottom, and now I'm trying to grab a hold of this cup, and it was so slippery, you guys. I was afraid I was going to knock that vase right off of there, but with Elena's help, I managed. This is what it ended up looking like after it was all dry. Look at that. It's absolutely gorgeous. But isn't it completely different than what you just saw? It's amazing how the paint's dry. So now I'm trying to decide whether I put a gloss coat over this, or if I leave it more of a pearlized matte tone. I would love to get your thoughts on that, and let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 16.
So that canvas, we just took the vase off of it. It is filling in. You can see me kind of sliding that plastic covered wood around over. I need to clean up my craft room. That's what it boils down to. I have no space for anything right now. But so now I'm going to go ahead and start moving the paint. This is sped up again 2.5 times. So I'm just trying to keep that pretty image, so to speak, in the middle of the canvas. And I thought that this looked absolutely gorgeous. Trying to keep that kind of flowery shape where it all comes together there. Trying to keep that somewhat in the middle of the design. I'm trying to make sure that I'm also hitting each of the corners and that the edges are all covered with paint. And then apparently where I set this down to dry, which actually is on a part of my crafting surface, it's apparently not completely level, because when I came down the next day to check on it, most of the paint had run off on just one side. I was so bummed because I actually ended up losing the part of this that I absolutely loved. So you can see how pretty the design is here. It's still nice, but it's not quite what it was. So the next day, and this is still a little bit wet, so I'm being very careful with it here, but this is what I ended up with. And you can see it all flowed kind of off the bottom of the thing there. I'm trying to decide which way is up. I think I might hang it this way. Again, would love your thoughts on this. It's still pretty, but it's just not nearly as interesting as I thought it was before. But let me know what you think.
DIY number 17.
Would you believe I still am not done with the paint? So one more project with the paint pouring, but a very different project than what we did the last couple. So I have all my paint layered, and I have this wood heart from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to go ahead and take the hanger off of it. And as you can see, I still have the same silicone mat here with all of the paint all over it. My thought was the silicone or the paint does not stick to the silicone mat. It doesn't. So you can peel it right off once it's dry. But I thought, it's so pretty, the paint that's on there. Maybe I'll just dip the back side of this into the paint and let that be the design for the back. I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. It could have been a complete mottled mess. Spoiler alert, I thought it was really pretty in the end. If I had to do it again, I would have actually dipped all of the sides in it too. And then I would have set it down on my giant push pins to keep it up off of the surface of the table, of the silicone mat, while I was doing the pouring that I'm doing right now. It's kind of going in a heart shape again, kind of like all over the surface. And now I'm going to make sure I get the sides. It wasn't really flowing evenly over the sides, probably because of the shape of this. So that's kind of why I'm saying I would have in hindsight, or I should have in hindsight, dipped the edges as well, and then also the bottom. And then I could have set it up on the giant push pins or thumbtacks, however you want to call them. And then I could have done the paint pour on the top of it. It all worked out well in the end. It was actually really, really pretty. You're going to see in just a minute, but just making sure that I've got all of the surfaces covered, and I'm trying not to mess with the design that I've got going on the top surface, which I think is really fun and funky. I like it a lot. But once I had that all done, I went ahead and I did get out my push pins, and I decided I was just going to move it off of the mat. Even though it won't stick to the mat, there's a lot of extra paint there, and I don't want all of that extra paint to come away with my with my piece, right? I would end up having to cut the paint away, and I didn't want to have to do that. So here it is all dry. That's the back. So I think it's really pretty, and the front is so fun. I had gone in and used my little torch to pop those bubbles as well, and it created all kinds of little cells. You're going to be able to see more of a close-up in just a minute, but in the meantime, I am grabbing my twine. I decided I wanted something longer than the hanger that came with it originally. So I put a loop through it, and I'm kind of tying that off, so to speak. And then I'm going to go to my stash and grab out some pre-painted beads that I have from a project a while back. And some of these are the buffalo check, as you can see. Some of them are white, some of them are gray, and there are black beads in there as well. I was debating just white. I was debating white with the buffalo check. Ultimately, I thought that the buffalo check was too busy with the design. I wanted something a little bit more simple, so I went with the white and the gray. I almost did just all white, and I think that would have been really pretty too, but I opted to alternate the white and the gray. Now, once I got this on here, I decided I really wanted more of a rustic look to it with a spacer, so I ended up tying a knot between the two beads. And so then I went ahead and pulled that down, and I thought that was super cute, and I decided I was going to do that. Of course, I didn't learn the first time that I should do the knot before I put the next bead on. So I get it down there. I'm like, you didn't put the knot in there. So now I have to keep running the bead through my knot. So yeah, you can learn from my errors, but knot it before you put the bead on. It makes it a little bit easier. I'm just a slow learner sometimes. Ooh, that time I actually did it right. Of course, I go back and revert to the other way in another moment, but I went ahead and continued to alternate the beads until I had 5 of them on there, 3 white, 2 gray, and then I just on the end tied it in a bow and just got that to the way I wanted it. I thought about tying off the ends, and then I decided I actually liked the look of them being a little bit frayed. Here I'm just pulling it a little bit tighter, each of the knots, and making the spacing a little bit looser with the knots by pulling those knots tighter. Hopefully that makes sense. But I did like the fraying, so I just went ahead and I held on to the end of it, you can see, and then I used my finger to kind of rub it and fray up that end. It was a little bit too long there, so I went ahead and trimmed that and then did it again. And I thought maybe in fraying it on purpose like that, it would kind of tangle it a little bit and help it not to unravel long term. But anyway, I think this is super sweet. Let me know what you think.
Okay, everybody, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the projects. If you did, please remember to give me a big thumbs up, leave me a comment, let me know which one was your favorite. And until the next time, be well, be kind, and make it a great day. Thanks so much for watching and take good care. Bye.